Well, hello everybody and welcome to the Creative Amplifiers show. And you may have noticed somebody's not here. Lisa, unfortunately, has had some last minute technical glitches with her audio setup, meaning that she couldn't join us tonight, unfortunately. But, you know, in the spirit of doing stuff together, we decided to put a little picture and a little call for help there. So, Mark, how you doing? It's just the gruesome twosome tonight.
Yeah, I'm very well. Sad that Lisa couldn't join us, although we have seen her and we've heard her very, very faintly, and we did get to wave. And that's amazing because that's like two times in a row, isn't it? We've had various technical issues and various things going on after however many shows we've done over the years. But if Lisa, she might be around, so she may well actually be commenting or at least taking part in any way that she can. But yeah, really good to be back. I'm excited for it to be summer. It's been so hot here, I've had to buy some extra gear for the studio with a fan for my Sony and a kind of a mini aircon type thing to take the heat out of my studio here. So the UK in May, not usually 33 degrees or whatever it's been.
It's bonkers. And it's helped then, all the cooling stuff that you put in there? You've not had any tech issues or anything falling over or anything? No?
So I was really concerned because I think I was being a guest on 4 podcasts and I was recording 3 or 4 of my own. So it was like, this could not work. So I needed to do something. So the little unit that I did was brilliant because it actually meant that in between recordings I could actually open the windows and actually put that on, and it really cooled things down and it really made the studio bearable. And the little Ulanzi fan that goes on the back of the Sony, it didn't miss a beat. I was so impressed because I was really, I thought this could be one of those things. And luckily I've got a couple of other cameras around that I can use that I had set up always just in case it all goes wrong. But no, it's absolutely brilliant. So the fan obviously works really well, didn't overheat, and my feet were relatively cool as well. So
well, that's the main thing.
Win-win.
At least you're not sitting in a bowl of ice water or something like that. And the fan's not too noisy because it's quite away from where you are as well, right? In terms of
no. So the fan's got 2 or 3 settings on the back of the camera. So that the lowest one, which is all I had it set up, was dead quiet. You can't really hear it at all. The little aircon thing would be fine if it was far enough away. I decided to keep it on when I wasn't recording and then just turned it off for the recording backwards and forwards all day. So, and because you can put in those sort of frozen blocks and all of that, it's really cool when you're being used. So you're only ever recording for an hour or so at the most. So in between that, and I've always got a bit of a buffer in between. So yeah, worked fine. I was very happy.
Tech things that we have to deal with, the heat, same here. It's been ridiculously hot and stifling. We've got Stefan in the house. Stefan, thanks for joining us. Hello from Sweden. Is it nice and warm in Sweden? It must be. It must be at this time of year. Or it might be cool. Who knows? Well, I'm going to switch to this scene because, as I said, it's just the two of us tonight. And we were planning to have a chat, and we're still going to really just go through some of the things that we've learned along the way, sort of some of the beginner steps and workflows that we have helped people with, and we've sort of thought about and worked on when you're just starting out in video. So some of the things that you might not consider when you're just starting out with your video production things, some of the things you must have, some of the things that you can leave till later and stuff like that. And we've all started from scratch, Mark with his podcast, me with my video stuff on YouTube. And, if I look back at some of the old things that I've done in YouTube videos, I think, oh gosh, really I could have learned and done something a little bit different. So maybe, Mark, if you wanted to start with maybe one thing that comes to mind with you on sort of things that you may have sort of thought about at the beginning and wish you'd known about earlier.
I think the biggest success was I actually did a podcasting course with John Lee Dumas from Podcasters Paradise. And the reason I say that was really good was because I'd been listening to his show anyway. I was starting to think about enjoying podcasts and maybe I might want to do one. And the thing that was so brilliant about this was it gave me kind of the whole landscape of what you needed to do, because it's very easy with the guest syndrome. You need this camera, you need this microphone, you need all that sort of stuff. And one of the great things was that kind of you only need what you need within your budget, and they gave lots of advice as to what some of those options were. But I think unless you know the whole landscape of what you're doing, it's easy to start almost too soon. So from my point of view, it's that kind of, well, I need to host the podcast somewhere. I need to know what my show's about. You know, can I actually edit a podcast? How do I go about scheduling the interviews with people, and actually understanding what all of those pieces are? So I sort of was thinking of it more kind of as if I'm in the sort of the middle of a bike wheel, like sort of right in the center, and then you've got all the spokes going out to all those different things that you need to do all around it. And then you can start to see how much time and effort you need to do for each of those things, what sort of tools that you can use that will serve its purpose, and then how you can then upgrade as you go. And then you can sort of see what you need now, and also how you can kind of expand as you get further down. So that was a really useful thing. And then just realizing there's only, you know, how much down a rabbit hole do you want to go? So if you take the editing, for example, it's that kind of, okay, am I doing sort of serious sort of professional level editing, or am I actually thinking, no, I just need it to be good enough? And what is good enough? And then what does that look like? And it's a bit of a mind-bending thing to begin with. But I remember the key thing I did actually, which was a really supportive thing for me, is I started listening to live radio. And I started to realize, what is it that I liked, and what did I notice when I really listened? So, for example, when I was first editing, it's that take out all the ums, take out all the gaps, take out all of the bits and pieces that you don't like. And then you realize it sounds very staid. But when you listen to live radio, there is the odd and there is the odd pause while people are thinking. There is the odd sort of inflection of what's going on, because it's a real conversation, and you get better at kind of just chatting all the time as you go through. But when you take all of that out, it sounds terrible. And if you've got someone who's umming and ahhing all the time and stuttering, then that's very hard to listen to as well. So I started to get an ear for that kind of what sounded like a genuine conversation, which I would be happy to listen to, as opposed to just getting very sort of theoretical about, oh, there's a little blip there, I'm going to take that out of the timeline and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, like I said, there's a rabbit hole for all of these things, but I think having an overall picture of what you're trying to do, and then seeing how that can expand, otherwise you're never going to get the thing going. And I think for me, probably the final takeaway would be the timeline of this. So I'd sort of set it all up, done the research, and then of course you could never start. Right. So I did have that kind of, I think for me, I think I started on like the 1st of December. I was like, I'm going to give myself, I think it was from the summer to the beginning of December, and then I'm going to launch. So it gave me enough time to do all of that research and play with all the things I needed to do. But I had a time that I wanted to start, as opposed to I'm going to start in 3 weeks and then realize that there's so much you need to learn that you're not able to do it. So sort of knowing where you are in terms of the skill level that you need and all that kind of thing, and what you might need. And I think now, with the amount of help and support that's around, I wouldn't have needed from the summer to December, you know, sort of 6 weeks, 2 months, especially if you've got someone to handhold you, then you kind of know what you can put your attention to and what you don't need to. And of course the tech's so much easier now, because you've got so many things that do, so many tools that help you in so many different areas, especially from an editing point of view, rather than sort of Audacity just with a timeline, and you're just literally just looking for something that's going to spike and then trying to work out how to even it all out and that kind of thing. Way back when, which was when I was doing call recorder for Skype, the original eChat thing I first started using way back when. So yeah, that was kind of that's sort of my sort of takeaways, which when I think back gives me a little bit of a nervous chill of kind of, oh wow, it sort of starts with no knowledge doing that. But I think it's really good, especially when we start sort of helping and supporting other people, to realize what that's like as someone who's worried and trying to get going to begin with, as opposed to, oh, it's fine, it will just be like this, because that's easy when you've been doing it for a while, but very different when it's your sort of first outing or your first sort of step into video or podcasting or whatever you're doing.
I think what's interesting, what you mentioned, is that it is a journey, right? So you really don't know a lot when you're starting off. And to your point around editing the podcast a lot to make it sound what you think is more fluid, and then when you actually listen to it back, it doesn't sound natural. We're not all listening to audiobooks, right? So and that's the thing as well, right? I think you compare maybe a podcast to something that you've done to an audiobook, which is incredibly polished. It's designed not to have any mistakes in it at all. And you think, well, I want a polished podcast that sounds like that. But then you just go online and you listen to a lot of really good podcasts, and as you said, it's just a natural conversation. Look at all the podcasts that are actually video now that you see person to person, and they're just, their thinking and the stumbling sometimes and stuff like that. And I think it makes you a better editor, and it helps you, I think, from your perspective, when you're working with other people, particularly around the podcast space, you can guide people and say, look, it's okay to make these mistakes. Leave them in. Don't take them out. You can make a judgment call, but it only comes with experience. When you've edited so many different podcasts, I think that you can actually sort of think about that and make that judgment call to say, well, this is good enough. This is fine. You don't have to polish it like a crazy person.
Yeah, because then it comes to time and money, doesn't it? That's the thing.
That's the
I can
thing.
make it even better, but I can spend 4 days doing it as opposed to 3 days.
I'll tell you, I'll get into my story in a second about video editing. Let's just go quickly to the comments. We've got a few people joined us as well. So let's have a look. Hello, 24-hour boss. I know I saw you on Roy's show a couple of weeks ago and connected via Instagram. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. So if you can just tell us your name in the comments, that would be great. You are in Texas at the moment. So it's probably going to be quite humid and hot in Texas, I presume. But let us know in the comments. Hello, Saeed. Thank you for joining us. And Saeed has a comment. Cutting out fillers with AI from a video podcast is just painful to watch. A jump every 2.5 seconds. You mentioned that. I'm not going to mention names because that's not what we do. But it's interesting that I've just been watching a couple of podcasts recently, video podcasts, and either they've got a new tool that they're using, but it's quite aggressive in the cuts that it's doing. So it's a video and they're giving it probably to, let's say, Descript or something, one of those software that actually cuts out the filler words and things. And maybe they haven't looked a lot at the actual video itself. So they've probably not gone and critiqued it and gone through it, because the whole point of giving a video to AI is not to worry about running through it later, because what's the point? You could cut them out yourself if you're gonna monitor it. So give it to AI, let it do its magic. And then it's been posted. But the jump cuts, as they're called, where you're actually cutting and it's a hard cut without a transition, is very hard to watch with this particular podcast. And I'm thinking, this is new because it was never like this. So maybe from an automation perspective, they're just trying to cut down the time. And in doing so, I think it's really just sort of deflated the brand a little bit. But it's difficult to watch to the point of where I couldn't watch it. So leave comments in the, leave your thoughts in the comments below, because I'm interested to know what you feel about jump cuts, because that was a big thing when I was video editing. You'd see 2 different types of videos on YouTube. You'd see the people that are doing the jump cuts, but they're being very clever in how they're cutting those. Either they're cutting to a bit of B-roll or they're cutting to something else, which makes the flow of the video look nice. And then you've got the people that do the really hard cuts, where it's like, and it's jarring. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Mark, but when you're watching something that's cut like that, which doesn't add to the story, because jump cuts in a film technique is where you're trying to cut through. Jump cuts are often used if you've got a long passage of time and you want to show the sequential movement through that time very quickly. So you jump cutting like somebody's walking through the forest and they'll jump to another scene, but it's a jump cut and you know it's them as a continuous piece of time, but it's cut in terms of shortening the time. But when you're watching a YouTube video, like a talking head, for example, and there's jump cuts everywhere, it's not good. It's not good. What's your thoughts on that?
I think you're right. I think that there's a common thing that's going on at the minute, which is people are trying to put so much content out now that time's a big thing, and the automation thing is really helpful from that point of view. But I think, like when we talked about AI before, it's like it's a great tool, but then it still has to be you that decides what it's going to be. So if you ask AI to do anything, give you some suggestions, write you something, you're still going to go back and look at it and try and put it in your words and use it as a starting point to then create your own content. And I think the same thing applies in this sort of scenario that we're talking about here, because it's brilliant, takes out loads of stuff, but unless you go back and look at it all and make sure that it's working for you, then you don't know what it's going to look like. And like I say, as soon as it becomes jump cuts like that, it's really hard to watch. And then it's that kind of, is it a video podcast? Is it a video show? Is it an audio podcast which has been filmed?
Right.
And what are you trying to do with it? And there are lots of shows which are obviously audio podcasts which have now just been filmed with sort of 2 up, and then they kind of flip backwards and forwards between them when they work successfully or not in some ways. And And the other thing, just while we're talking about this sort of thing, I find is the audio on these. So there are a lot of celebrities, lots of TV people who now have podcasts, and they're used to working with audio and in TV. And of course, normally you've got lapel mics or boom mics or whatever it happens to be. But because it's a podcast, they're all using Shaw's or Rode or whatever. But of course, we're fairly stationary, and so we're here, and hopefully the audio is fairly clear, but also it's fairly consistent because we're not walking around or moving around or whatever. But because they're actually filming it like a TV show, they're either not having the microphone close enough to get that, or they're forgetting that it's actually a podcast as well, and they're actually then just talking to someone who's over there, and they're doing it, and they're not really moving, but they're talking about this. But they're dynamic mics, they're not designed to do that, but everyone uses these mics, so therefore they're doing it. But you would think when they've got a production company and people working around with them, either use different mics and just basically it is a TV show on YouTube or whatever it happens to be, or it's a podcast and you actually decide to do it. And there's so many great mics out there now that, if you're not going to sit still and do it like that, then why not just use a different mic? But it just seems to me that there's a lot of halfway house, and like you say, depending on what you're doing, if you're watching something, you kind of get away with it because you can see people moving around and doing different things, and if they're looking at this or doing whatever, you kind of understand that you're going to get a different bit of audio, and so it kind of makes sense in the whole. But if you're actually then just listening to it as part of an audio, you're like, what's going on here? I can't really tell. And then someone's just decided that their microphone's here and the other person's got it right up, and no one's actually listened as they're doing it, and then they suddenly realise, oh, actually it is a little bit different, or it's going to move.
There's no context,
and,
right?
Exactly. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not monitoring this live. I mean, you're producing this show. I mean, I couldn't tell you what that sounded like differently in real time. And so if I'm just on a show and I forget the fact that the microphone's there, then I wouldn't care because I'm just doing what I'm doing. But someone somewhere has to be sort of monitoring all that, or at least trying to do something to sort of make it work slightly differently.
And if it's not live, which a lot of these podcasts aren't, they're pre-recorded, then there's nothing wrong with the producer just putting their hand up and saying, you moved away from the microphone. That's really distracting for the audio listeners. Let's move back. And to your point, when you just moved away, it's like, I mean, you can tell, but you can see that you moved away, and that's fine because there's context. And like not back to film school, but I used to follow, I still do, Philip Bloom, who's a director of photography in the UK, very famous sort of video producer and so on. He's been on CNN, done lots of documentaries and things. And one of the things he used to say was, if you're doing a talking head and you're in, like say, doing an outside broadcast, and it's just you and the camera's just focused on you, and there's a huge amount of extraneous noise going on, you should, one, keep that in the audio track because it gives you context of where you are, but don't hide it. Show it. Either cut to it if it's a band that's playing in the background, if it's a procession that's going on, if there's, whatever's happening, cut to it. So then it gives the audience an understanding of exactly where that noise is coming from, because the audience, as soon as they hear something that's not you and quite distracting, their attention is now on that thing that's distracting, and they've lost the momentum and the contact with you. So just cut to that piece of video showing that person or event that's going on, and then go back to it, and therefore you've got the context. It's a little thing, but it goes a long way into sort of bringing people back into that video. But to your point, moving away from the microphone when you're on an audio podcast is not good. And as you said, there's so many great microphones now. All these DJI or the what's the one that we use, the Hollyland mics, all those are just great because you can just roam, be free. But interesting.
Yeah, and like I say, some of these, they've got production teams and stuff that are doing. That's their job and part of that thing. If you're doing the whole thing yourself, there's a million things to think about, and sometimes you make a call as to whether the content's more important than the thing, and you try and do stuff in post and all that. I'm not saying there's a shoulda, woulda, coulda, but I think these things to be aware of. And the other thing which I've noticed, which I find fascinating, is the people that have gone from this sort of remote conversations, where I think it's a Zoom thing in terms of generally people don't try and speak over each other because they know how hard that is. So like we're chatting, we try and make it obvious when the next person is going to chat. Occasionally you get the odd thing, but it's usually quite clear, which is brilliant if you're repurposing that for an audio podcast. As soon as you get people in a live studio, they start talking as if they're in the pub or in a coffee shop, because you've got sort of in jokes going on. You've got kind of that sort of chemistry in real time. And so you kind of all talk together a little bit, which when you're watching is great because you sort of feel like you're part of that whole atmosphere. But when you're only listening, so often you can't really tell what's going on, because all you hear is lots of noise, because you don't even hear the individual people speaking. It just sounds like a cacophony of kind of sounds, and I'm hearing that more and more as well. And from people that I sort of enjoyed listening to on an audio podcast, who've obviously then been told, we need to do video, it needs to be like this, it needs to be like that, but not understanding or not being aware enough of all of those things. And again, I think a lot of that's time. We need to get 3 episodes out today, or we've got the studio for this amount of time, and all those sorts of things. But I just find it fascinating, because there's a real sort of learning curve to all of those things when you kind of really notice those things. A bit like I said earlier on about the listening to the radio. It's only when you really listen and you sort of write down, what is it that I like, what don't I like, what am I noticing, that then you start to kind of picture all that sort of stuff together, and you can go, oh, I want to try and eliminate that. How do I do that? Or what am I trying to achieve? Or what bad habits have I got into? And then you can grow through it. And like I say, it's a journey. There's no right or wrong or shoulda, woulda, coulda, but what am I trying to do, and what would I like to listen to, and why is that?
I think it's really important as well to decide, if you are doing a video podcast or an audio podcast, is the video podcast going to be repurposed to audio only format? And if it is, then to Mark's point, be very mindful about the types of things that you're doing in the video podcast. But also, if it's just going to be video, then it doesn't really matter. Then you can be in that sort of pub brawl type of conversation where it doesn't really matter too much, because you're part of that, and you're in, and you just feel immersed in that sort of conversation. But also make a judgment call. For example, if you do a video podcast and there are things that are not really lend itself to sort of the listener just on an audio side, then don't use it. You don't have to repurpose everything that you do. So I guess you have to make a judgment call yourself as well, which comes to the point of where you should be like planning and understanding really what you want to get out of that podcast and what's the medium for. Got lots of conversation going on in the chat. So let me just go to the chat a second, because people have some things to say about jump cuts and all kinds of stuff I can see. Let me go all the way up here. Goodness. Okay, so Saeed says, cutting out filters, especially with AI from a video podcast, is just painful to watch. A jump every 2.5 seconds. Hello, Marianne. Thank you for joining us. And Brian. Thank you, Brian. So it's Brian, right? 24-hour boss is Brian. Brian the boss. Easy to remember. There you go. Saeed says, in audio only, you will not notice that much. Yeah, so he's talking about the jump cuts. So if the jump cuts are clean without the clicks and pops that you sometimes get with not very good editing, because if you cut a piece of video and it's got audio in it, you'll get this little click, and just putting a little sort of a trim silence on the tail end of that audio will help, but that can be distracting. Marianne says, I get my editing to remove the silence moments, but yes, I don't like if the video cuts are too obvious. So either do a nice transition or a zoom and pan out. Yeah, there's a good technique as well where you can do a quick ramp up of the video. So it's like a fake zoom. So if you're cutting hard between a talking headshot, you can actually cut, and then the next frame will be a very quick zoom in, or like a punch in. So it looks like the camera's actually punched in, but what it's actually done is covered up and masked a hard cut. I've used that quite a lot in some of my early videos when I was terrible at editing and things like that, which is good. Hey Yog, thanks for joining us. Hope life is good with you. And where are we going here? Oh yeah, and one last more. So Say says, I watched podcasts that were recorded in Zoom, not the best quality because it's just Zoom, but authentic, not over engineered, and the content or conversation was nice. And thank you for joining us. You've joined a couple of shows recently, so thank you very much for joining us. And yes, so let's go back to this. I don't have a button for the two of us up. There you go. So yeah, some interesting thoughts around sort of planning for audio. And we know that audio is, 80% of video. Without good audio, you can forget it. It's not gonna run if it's bad audio on a video. So just trying to think about things that I started off and wish I'd learned. I think the gear thing was a problem for me at the beginning. So I did have a YouTube channel years and years ago, as I mentioned before, All Gold Tech, back in the late 2000s, which is all about retro gear. And I was working with a guy that was a film school teacher. So he knew a lot about storytelling and things like that, which was fun, where I learned a bit of. But in terms of like camera movements, editing, and so on, not the best. But the plan was to try and get as good of gear as possible to make the show quality, never mind the quality, feel the width, make it look as good as possible. Not necessarily the content was great, but it looked good. And it's very easy to go down a rat hole of trying to make yourself and the image and the quality of the video look as good as possible without really being intentional and thinking about, well, what actually is this video about, and is it going to bring value to the people that are watching it? To Saeed's point, there's plenty decent videos out there that have been recorded on Zoom on your phone because the quality is engaging and the subject matter resonates with you and it keeps the audience occupied. So I was a little bit, I wouldn't say gear obsessed, but I wanted, I'm all about making things the best I possibly can. So if you've got a decent camera, why not try and make it look as good as possible with some way in forgetting about what am I doing this for in the first place. So I lost my way a little bit initially with YouTube. And then I started back again in 2016. And it was purely going to be around vlogging, because vlogging was big back then. You had Casey Neistat starting out and everyone was doing the vlogging thing. And where I was living in the UK, every time I'd go on a project with work, I'd take some time out, do some sort of behind the scenes videos, some vlogging and things like that. And that helped me a lot with editing. So I learned to edit my stuff as good as I possibly can. There was no AI back then. There was no sort of great tools that you could use today. So that taught me a lot around sort of getting familiar with the editing process and learning to maybe tell stories better through video. I didn't really need to have like a run of show. I didn't need a big plan. I had to have an idea about what I was going to film, but it was a pretty loose sort of schedule. Now, switching over to live streaming, as we've all started from scratch with live streaming, whether that's just a one-person show or a group effort that we do today here, it's very different because if you don't have somebody like Mark to bounce ideas off and have a conversation with, if it's just you live talking head, you have to have some plan. You have to have a run of show because one, you're going to be basically going live to nobody when you first start because nobody knows who you are. Nobody's subscribed to your YouTube channel or wherever you're broadcasting to. So if you want to make the content engaging to be found later, to be evergreen, you have to have some form of plan, a run of show. Now, even if it's only a 10 or 15 minute live stream, have something that's written down to keep you on point because you will run out of things to think about and say very quickly if you're doing it all from your head. So that's one of the things I learned very quickly. I tried to do it off the cuff. Working in consultancy and IT, that's what we do sometimes. You have to think off the cuff and sort of talk to people as we do. But it got very, very difficult when a camera's in front of you. You've gone live and you actually think, I don't know and I'd like to know your thoughts around this. When you go live, you get this perception that anybody in the world is going to find you and they're going to think that you look really dumb on camera because you have nothing to say. So that insecurity comes straight away, even though in reality, there's nobody watching you. But you always get this thing in my head that somebody's going to be watching me. They're going to be critiquing what I'm saying. I have nothing to say. Now I've made it worse because now I'm thinking about I've got nothing to say and it goes on and on. So all that to say, have a plan. Take a breath. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it is good to help you. It's like your little crutch, right? You have a little set of show notes or a little run of show or something to keep you on point. Even when you're doing a presentation or a talk of some kind, it's always good to have something in front of you just to sort of review and just keep in mind. What about you, Mark? When you started transitioning from like recorded podcast to live, did you have any similar feelings or you were a bit more established back then because you were interviewing people and talking to people?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm much happier when we're doing this because I'm quite happy just to chat and, and to do that. I find the just me on camera much harder. And like you, I need to run a show. And also the great thing about using Ecamm is the fact that you can then just integrate, like say, whether it's a picture, whether it's just a bullet point, whatever it happens to be. So the things that I might have written down, I also would then be able to have as a screen. And so it kind of gives you that natural cadence as well, and just gives me a crutch in order to, I'm going to do this, I can show this, I'm going to do this, I can show this, I can do this, I can show this. And then that way it kind of helps. I still feel like a little bit awkward, because it kind of, I start to feel like I get a bit more monotone, and I get a little bit kind of, I'm just delivering information. I'm not very good at the kind of, as if I'm just chatting to the people watching on my own, in the way that it's just what we're doing here. I'm chatting to you, and people watching are sort of part of that. So there's just something different, I think, about it. And I think it's a skill that, like a lot of these things, it's all about the reps. I'm much better at it now than I was before.
Yes.
But yeah, all of those things that can actually help are really, really important. And interestingly, about all the tech and all the rest of it, for all my shows, I still have, exactly, I still have that. If all else fails, I've got those things here, and I always say to my guests on the podcast, it's that kind of, I've got stuff written down, I've done my research, I know where I want this to go. But the best interviews, the best conversations normally happen because all of those things will be things I'm interested in, but our conversation will take us through all of those things. And there might be the odd thing I want to gear the conversation towards or something like that. But having pen and paper and just all the right information, because like I say, you suddenly go live and you're a bit kind of, what's the name of that person? What show are they on?
Right.
What show am I on? What am I doing? So even if you have to go, yes, okay, and yeah, I'm with Neil, that's fantastic, I really liked what you did, and I can just clock that, the Creator Cafe, it's a really great thing, yeah, great, it comes out on a month, whatever it happens to be, and you can do it in a really natural way, and it doesn't feel like you're having to read anything, but you've got a natural kind of moving around a little bit, rather than I'm always looking dead straight into the camera. It can be a bit weird as well. I think you can start to free yourself up a little bit then, but yeah, definitely happier doing this than I am just on. But maybe that should be my challenge coming up. I should do the next 30-day challenge. I should do just me
solo, free bowling,
solo for a bit. Yeah,
it is daunting. It is daunting, and I'm like you. I much prefer having a conversation. I still do live shows from time to time on my own. Only when I've got maybe something to demo, something like that, because that keeps me occupied. I can't do the talking head, let's just chat and hope somebody turns up. If it was a huge audience, then you get a lot of nice questions from the audience. And speaking of which, the people who are watching right now, please let us know in the comments things that helped you when you first started off, things that maybe you would have done differently, knowing what you do now when you first started, because we love to know tips and tricks from everybody else, because everybody's different. Everybody starts their journey from either different perspective. Somebody just maybe hit the ground running and they've been it's easy for them. Some people struggle. Some people find it very hard to even just press that record button, never mind the go live button. I mean, if you'd asked me 10 years ago that we're doing a show, multiple shows, live shows, guest shows, bringing people on, terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Fear of public speaking, things like that. It's all in here. But to your point, reps is important as well. Even if you just record stuff and then play it back and critique yourself and just have a look about how you're doing without ever having to go live. You can go live to Unlisted on YouTube. Nobody will ever see it. It's just for you. And then you can feel like you're going live without actually going live. And that's another good thing that I've used to do as well. And good for testing as well, because you don't know, to Mark's point, you can't hear how you actually sound. I mean, I've got feedback in my headphones, but it's not the same as the person on the other end listening, whether I'm too loud, whether, too quiet or whatever it is, or there's background noise that sometimes I won't hear. So there's a lot of things that you can do yourself just to test out and record and things. And I think that's one of the important stuff. Next sort of tip, thought from you? Anything that you have? Well, I've got a few as well.
I've got a couple of things, excuse me, that spring to mind. One of them is just on the kind of the talking to camera thing, is that I very much like the bullet points. I very much like the kind of the talking around stuff. Very happy to do that, except when I'm trying to do intros for my podcast, because I like to waffle and I like to repeat myself. And the more times I interview really great speakers and people who know what they're talking about, it's like being really succinct. When we were at Creator Camp UK, that whole thing about the public speaking about at the end, just to wrap up, or just to have these things that you can really help yourself with. I'm terrible at that a lot of the time. And so when I got the Elgato prompter, I would just start off with those bullet points. I thought that's great. I can look into the camera. I can talk around the intro. I've got all the information there. But actually, completely against anything I've ever done before, I now, because I only want it to be less than a minute maybe, I actually found it's easier to write out what I'm going to do, because I know it's going to last that long. It's got all the information and I can package it in a way that really works. However, it's a very different skill reading that and making it sound like I'm just chatting to you and telling you about the fact my guest has been in education for 25 years and they've been to Harvard and they've got this new product out and they're able to sort of be on this board and actually excel in this particular field of education and talk about it as if I'm just chatting to you, as opposed to they have been to this person and they've been to Harvard and they have a new thing that comes out.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to do that. And I'm still learning, but I'm getting better at it. But then you come back to that kind of that perfectionism thing, because it's that kind of, this is an intro and it's 1 minute long. And I've been here for 2 hours because I've done it 400 times and I've missed the odd word, or I've done it too quick and I've tripped over myself or whatever. And I just think that learning curve is really interesting, and it's been a new skill for me, that kind of, I'm actually going to do it as if I'm a prompter. And again, what I did was I thought, it looks so staid. It doesn't sound like it does when I'm interviewing someone. And then I went to TV and I watched some of the great presenters who are like auto cueing because they're about to start the next segment for a thing.
Right.
And I'm like, they don't sound the same as when they're chatting to their co-host, just chatting generally, because they're actually looking into the camera. They've got a script and they have a really professional, brilliant way of doing it, but it doesn't sound the same as when they're having a conversation. And I thought, so why am I trying to do the same? I want to get it as personal as I can and as sort of personality led as I can, but it's not going to be the same as when we're just chatting. So that's been a really interesting thing in terms of that, being more experienced now, but doing new things and deciding how that works. And I think the second thing I'll just pick up on Saeed's point about the kind of the being in Zoom, because like I say, there are great videos out there of people just chatting on Zoom and the audio is what it is, and like I say, the content's engaging. The thing I'm finding from a podcast host point of view is that people just say, I do these things all the time, I don't need an external camera, an external microphone, anything, because I just do these things and I just talk into my computer and it sounds great, and so I'm not going to do it. And then you're like, okay. And then you're like, part of that's because they've done it so many times and they think their audio is okay. But what they don't necessarily know is that it might sound great on a couple of podcasts because someone's done so much producing in the back end before the podcast has come out that it sounds really good, but not what was coming in. And also just the fact that people's assumption of what they think audio is okay, because they hear it so often. And if I'm in a Zoom call, then I expect it just to be like a Zoom call, even though, as we know, we use Ecamm and Zoom together. It's all integrated. We're in Zoom now, but it doesn't look like a Zoom call. But because we know that's the case, and it's quite hard sometimes to get that message across and have that conversation. And then sometimes you have a decision to make. It's that kind of, I do appreciate what you're saying, but I'd really rather that you did. Or sometimes you just think, this guest has got something really, really important to say, and I think it's going to be a brilliant conversation, and I'd rather do the hard work around it or sacrifice a little bit of what, like you said, that perfectionism or the professionalism of what I think it should be, because what am I actually here for? Do I want the best sounding podcast or video in the world, or am I actually trying to share a message which is really important? And that's kind of the reason I'm doing the whole thing to begin with. And I think the whole thing is a balancing act. There's a fine line, and you make that call in so many different ways. But I think being aware that I think these conversations are happening in people's heads and in their production teams and the people they're working with all the time, and it does ebb and flow. But I think certainly from the outside in, I think people being aware that just having a microphone, if you're going to do a lot of stuff online, is really, really worth it these days. And don't just assume that just because the cameras are better and the mics are better now, it's still not the same as having something which is purpose.
Yeah, I think the biggest single upgrade I talk to people about, like my clients, and people come to me and say, what would you do with my setup? And the first thing I would say was microphone. Just go and get yourself a USB microphone if you don't want any of the frills, and you can pick up you mentioned before, is it the Samsung QU2, the like world leading microphone, USB based microphone, dirt cheap, relatively decent quality, dynamic mic, can just go from night and day. And you know, we've seen Adrian show that as well in TubeFest a few months ago, where he was just incrementally changing things in people's studio to go from just decent light makes a big difference, then the audio side. So you can make these incremental changes and you don't have to have a polished professional studio from day one. But the single most decent upgrade is a microphone. And I think to your point around the Zoom thing, where people have come on to your show and said, yeah, I've done this 1,000 times, it sounds fine. I think you're right. A lot of the time, there's a lot of production gone in the background to make them sound good. But because of COVID, Zoom became ubiquitous. It became the norm. It was acceptable. And people got very familiar with that look and that sound and that feel of being on a Zoom call. So it's more so, I say socially, it's more accepted in the podcast and recording circles now that it's not too terrible. You see BBC TV and all the other news channels, a lot of people that they bring on interviews, they're either on their phone, on Zoom, or they're in their hotel on Zoom on a terrible laptop. They haven't sent them any kit. They haven't had time. They want to get the scoop. They want to get the story. They want to just get somebody on camera, and they've done that by just sending out, a Zoom link and away you go. Just turn up with whatever you've got. And I had to do a lot. I remember this one podcast that I did, and like you, it was a decision that had to be made by the client. So I was remote producing the client's podcast, and they had this person that came on, only got this person for a certain period of time. It's almost like a now or never type interview. And then they were flying off somewhere and we couldn't get them for like 6 months. And we really wanted to hear what they had to say about an important topic. And they were in their hotel, and it wasn't the tidiest of hotel rooms. Like, I've just got up, let's go type of thing, terrible lighting. It was like sort of mid-morning. So there's no even natural light, laptop camera, not even a good laptop camera, and no microphone. And it's like, what don't you hear the term fix it in post? Well, that was definitely a fix in post type of scenario whereby you just have to run with it. This guy's interview was too important to just say, come back. And he wouldn't been able to do it anyway for a long period of time, as I said. So you just have to go, okay, let's make it look as good as we can. Let's just do that. And I ended up putting like a fake background on to mask out the hotel, mask out the back of the hotel, put it through Orphonic or something like that. But those things are lifesavers, because if you don't have those tools available to you, then you are going to have a subpar audio production, and there's nothing you can do about it after the fact if you don't. So thank you for all those tools that are available, because without them now, it makes life so difficult. But as you said, don't sweat it. You don't have to be perfect on day one and things like that. And I think it's important to mention. A couple of comments coming in. Let's have a look. Not that one. So Saeed says, I learned simplicity wins. It's easy to fall in love with your own work and things nobody will care about. Keep it simple, smooth and working. You don't need all the bells and whistles. Well said. Absolutely, you don't. And Brian said what he's learned is doing reps help the fear of being on camera. I was afraid of being on camera when I first started. I chose to do audio first because of this. And that's great, because a lot of the times what I've seen is people don't like how they sound on camera as opposed to how they look. They can get away with, they don't mind too much how they look on camera, but it's the voice. Hearing your own voice for the first time is a very weird thing. And I'll come to Mark to that in a second. Saeed says, I have to be correct. I have to correct Neil. Best investment to start with, 20mm cat cable. It will cost you basically nothing. All right. Yes, Ethernet is the way forward. I stream for my Airbnb in Q in April. There you go. See, you got to start somewhere, right? That's the thing. What's your thoughts, Mark, on hearing your own voice for the first time?
I think
stunned silence.
No, I just remember my first 10 episodes and editing them and just thinking, oh my word, I'm going to be doing this for a long time. It's going to sound a little bit weird. And I think you get used to it. And also I found very quickly I stopped listening to myself because I was so focused on my guest. And that was the thing I was trying to enhance the most. So it got easier, quicker. There are still some words that I can't say without me sounding as if I'm properly from the West Country here in England. And I can't say world without it sounding like that. And
okay.
there's 2 or 3 words which I really struggle with, and they now make me laugh probably more than anything else. But certain things I'm a little bit kind of conscious of from that point of view. But it is a little bit different. But I think the reps point's a really, really good one. And I think the thing that people don't do, and this is one of the things I explain to my pupils when I'm doing my drum tutoring and stuff, is the fact that when you think you've got it, you then need to do it like another 50 times, because it's that repetition that then means in the heat of the battle, or when stuff starts to go wrong, it's under your hands, it's in your voice, it's in your wheelhouse of what you're doing, and you can only do that with the reps. And so that kind of, I've done it once or twice and now I'm ready to go. Well, of course you have to start somewhere, so yes, absolutely get on with it, but understanding that it's the multiple times, and when you think you've got it, still doing it, that you start to think like you're in a better place. So I think that's definitely key. And yes, Ethernet cable, I'm with you. That's a very, very, very important thing. I did a couple of things recently where I didn't have mine plugged in, and it worked absolutely brilliantly, and it was fine. And then like the third time, I was like, oh, I haven't plugged that in yet, have I? And I really did notice the difference. Not that I was doing anything other than a Zoom meeting or something. No one would have known apart from me, but you get so used to it just being plugged in and it working as seamlessly as possible that one sort of millisecond of dropout from your Wi-Fi and you sort of notice and catch every single little thing.
Yeah, it does make a difference. So top tips there: get plugged in to your router and don't use Wi-Fi. Especially, I mean, again, if you're on a Zoom call and it's not important, it's fine. But if you're doing something like this, hardwiring is the way to go. More comments flowing in. Thank you for the comments, everybody, today. It's been wonderful. Okay. Saeed says, if you cannot listen to your own voice, how can you expect anyone else want to listen to you? It's a very good point. Cringy in the beginning, but you'll get over it. I watch my recordings and don't care anymore. And that's a good attitude, because it is your voice. It's your natural voice. And the way you speak is the way you speak. And it's funny because this is how you talk to people in a coffee shop every day. So this is no different than talking on camera. It's just that you don't have the luxury when you are talking to somebody in a group to hear yourself in the background, which is very, very interesting.
It definitely is that, isn't it? Is that sense of actually people are hearing you all the time. They know what you sound like. It's only your version that slightly scrambles your head, because it doesn't make any difference to anybody else.
No, that's true. York says, too long ago, but I was puzzled listening to my first video, but that was 2016. Yes, it is very daunting listening to your old stuff. And hey, Bob, hearing your own voice is the same as seeing your picture for me. Over time and repetition, you stop seeing you and start seeing the complete picture. You stop hearing and start hearing the content. Oh, I see. Yes. Good point. Thank you for these wonderful comments, and thank you for joining us tonight. A bit more stuff to come up, no doubt. Let me just think of another bit. Oh, we just miss her. We'll just throw that picture on there. Just a moment. And there we go. All right, so we're back. Lisa, if you're watching, I hope you get your stuff sorted and you can just call on Mark and myself for a set of ears and eyes just to maybe look over this stuff. I mean, even if it's just to have a moan, we're here.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're there with your feet up with a coffee, just send us a quick picture. We're happy to share that as well.
Anyway, so let's go. One thing that I gave a tip to recently to one of my customers that I learned the hard way as well is, and this might seem just trivial, but if you are changing your links and things, I'll give you a scenario. So say you're moving, or you have already like a Calendly service, a service of booking your meetings, a way of telling people this is your call to action or something like that. Now, you probably end up putting that link, that call to action, in multiple different places, all over your YouTube descriptions, all of your social posts, wherever it might be, newsletters and things like that. One of the things that I will wholeheartedly recommend for anybody is having something called like URL redirect. And that's basically taking a fixed domain name. In my case, it's bookme.neilfaramond.live, right? So that's for me to get people to book a session with me, right? Now, if I want to change that, and it was, let's say, a Calendly link, which is a hard-coded link, for example, then I would have to go and change that link everywhere if I was upgrading or moving to something else. So my tip would be to look at using these URL redirects or getting a domain name is something that if you have to change the underlying link, whatever that is, your call to action, your booking link, whatever it is, you only have to change that in the back end and you have to change it anywhere else. And a customer had to unfortunately go through all their social posts and everything because they made one change, they changed provider, therefore that broke every other link that they had out there. And you want to keep these because a lot of these links are evergreen, especially if you want people to talk to you and maybe book a session with you and get some business and so on. So a lot of these URL redirect sites are free for up to 5 redirects. You just have to get the domain names and things like that. But that was just a top tip that I learned the hard way as well by having to do it myself some time ago. But now I have things that are just set, ready to go. I don't know whether you employ any of those URLs and things like that, but it's important just in case, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think on that note of when you're sort of starting up and setting yourself up, it's worth thinking about how serious you are about what you want to do, because it's very easy to go, I'm just going to give it a go. I'm going to do all the free versions. I'm going to find something that will kind of work. And then you get a year or two in and you're like, actually, I really need a proper bit of software or proper bit of kit that's going to really help me do this. And then you have to move your email list over, or you have to, your whole sort of workflow completely changes because you're having to upgrade, not upgrade on the piece of tool, or not upgrade on the tool that you've got to a different plan, but just change your whole service. And then that's a real pain. And someone did give me that advice, and they were like, because I was originally thinking about what email provider to go for, and do you just do this, do you just do that? And they were like, right, okay, here's like 2, 3, 4 versions. There's a price difference in some of these. Work out what you need, when you think you're going to need it, and what you can grow into. And you might not ever get that far, but you're probably better off investing a little bit in terms of time and maybe a bit of money to get something which is going to really work and support what you need. Sometimes you have to change, but you don't want to be doing those things very often. And so if you can eliminate some of that to begin with, then do eliminate it in the beginning and find something which people recommend. And it's worth, a lot of these things have free trials, don't they? So try them out, see what works for you, because everyone works in a slightly different way, and things are changing all the time. But be wary of that, because when you have to do it, it's an absolute minefield.
Oh, it is awful. And Bob has mentioned something. Yeah, I mean, you can absolutely do this. So Linktree will allow you to have, one link, and then you can put all your underlying links and stuff like that. That's fine. Yeah, and it all depends on what you have. Like if you've got an email address and it's your domain, then you can change the underlying email provider as well without having to change things. Because the last thing you want to do is change your email after all this time and so on. I just wanted to ask you, Mark, is it raining hard where you are? Because I think I can hear it on your window just in my headphones.
Yeah, it's just literally started.
Hammering down.
Absolutely hammering down. You've been to my place now.
Yes.
And so I'm literally, as you can see, up in the thing. And most of the time you can't hear it when it's just raining, but just every now and again when you've sort of got raindrops that are like, I don't know, grapes or whatever they are, and it suddenly starts hammering down. And,
happy June the 1st to you then, because obviously the weather's,
exactly.
I mean, what is going on? You had blazing sunshine.
Yeah, but it's an interesting thing, like you were saying before about, it's worth pointing that out if people are hearing something random in the background. I was recording the other day, and there seemed to be some helicopter that decided above our house was the place it wanted just to hover for about 5 minutes. And I was like, well, I can go to this scene and I'm muted, and that's fine because I'm still on camera because I'm not talking at the minute. And I thought, this is about to end this part of the conversation. I'm going to have to jump in, and then it's going to sound like I'm in the middle of a war zone. And it was exactly that thing. Sometimes it's better to say, oh, the dog's just barked because the postman's come. Great. I mean, I don't have a problem with that if I'm on a podcast and something's happened, because it gives you that context. Like I say, if you're trying to ignore it, then that makes it worse. And luckily I managed to get away with the helicopter scenario because I didn't need to chat until I think it had literally gone away. But I'll find that out when I start editing that one next week.
It just reminded me about something, a top tip. Know where your mute button is for your microphone at all times. 1, to unmute yourself if you accidentally mute yourself. And two, if you need to cough, sneeze, or block out any noises, as Mark's just mentioned, like helicopters, know where your mute button is. You don't want to end up sounding like Norman Collier, reference from the 80s, nobody will get that. But the point is, Mark got it, thankfully. But the point is that you need to really understand where your mute button is, because it's really important. And a lot of these programs will have like a big red sort of button and things like that. Some programs could be better. And a lot of the new devices now have like a capacitive mute button. I don't like those capacitive mute buttons on the back of an audio interface, because you gently just, you fiddle, you talk with your hands, touch it, boom, you've gone on mute. Nobody can hear you for a while. And how many times have you started a podcast? Go on, sorry.
I was going to say, have you got a mute button on your Stream Deck? Or do you do it?
Yeah, I do have a mute button on my Stream Deck, but I've got my Rodecaster on my right, so I can just hit and it's a big red sort of, it's glowing red if it's on mute, so at least I know it's on mute. But yeah, typically the Stream Deck. Yeah, do you use the Stream Deck for that?
I've got it on there, and I use it when I'm doing presentations, but I use it less when I'm doing this sort of thing. I'm using more and more Stream Deck buttons here, but I've actually got I've sort of got my prompter here, and I've got literally the first thing at the top of the monitor below it is the mute button on eCam.
Right.
So that's the first thing. If anywhere that I'm literally just there, I can see where it is, and the mouse is usually hovering around that way, and then everything else is on the monitor on the other side. But yeah, so I know exactly where it is, and it's a quick, hopefully a quick fix.
There's a top tip from Saeed. Create a page on your Stream Deck that's just 15 mute buttons. So every button's a mute button. I love that. And Saeed has got a Stream Deck beginners class coming up next week on the 9th. And hopefully you start with that as your top tip, Saeed, because that's a winner. That is an absolute winner right there. That's fantastic. So much.
That's fantastic. And that's if you've got your boxing gloves on. It doesn't matter. You can literally hit anything. And it all just does it.
Oh dear. Jorg says he uses the Rodecaster to mute. Yeah, I mean, it's again depends what audio interfaces you got there. If you see Ken and Glenn on the eCam, they've got this big red button, which I know is actually for an air horn, but that's a great idea for a big mute button as well. Quick question to the audience. Couple of minutes we're going to be hanging around for. If you've got any other tips for us or tips to share with people, then just put them in the comments. We'd love to know some of the things that you've tripped over in the past and you've learned from and so on, because it's always great to share the knowledge and so on. Right, Mark, any more before we've already been going an hour, can you believe that?
I know.
Time flies when you're having fun. So any more quick tips and things that you would potentially, let people know, this is what I would do if I was starting out today?
I think I'd be very careful about what I was trying to do and why, and my restrictions around it. So, for example, if you're starting a podcast, if your outcome is the best sounding or the best looking, and a million things that sort of trickle down from that, then you'll be doing it for like 5 days a week. Within all of those things, and you want to do the best job that you can, but you might only have like 4 hours. So in which case, work out what those things are that you want to make sure that are going to save you time and those sorts of things. So for example, one of the things that I did, which I was advised to early on, was that as part of my booking process, I get as much information as I possibly can when people book in. So they've got the bio, they're sharing headshots, they're doing all their links, phonetically saying the name, whatever it happens to be, so that when I then come to upload, I'm not going, oh, this was a great thing, I've got no information about them, I've then got to visit a million things to try and pull a description together and all of that. So the more information you can get up front, things like that, which are just work, that managed to save me hours, and that makes a big difference. And you could apply that to anything these days, using AI for things, and like you say, editing and whatever. But work out how much time you've got, and then work out where you need to spend the most of that time, and try and eliminate as much of the rest of it as you possibly can, so you've got sustainability, that you can keep going. Otherwise you fall into that thing that there's a million podcasts or whatever your content is, and most people have only put 5 episodes out because they burn out after however long.
That's true. I mean,
want you to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my advice nowadays, if you'd asked me this 5 years ago, my answer would be different, but I would say to you now, create with intent and value. meaning provide some value to the people that are actually going to be watching your video. Unless it's a pure, fun, entertaining show where it's comedy all the way and so on. Because unfortunately, whether we like it or not, the answers to a lot of questions are so accessible now using AI. And AI will give you a walkthrough and a workflow and step-by-step process for most of the common things that people are asking for. Now, quite rightly, it's not a human interacting with you and telling you that. That's why I think live streaming like we're doing now, having the audience interaction, getting that sort of virtual feedback, having that connection that we have today with the audience, Mark and I talking in a conversation if we were in a coffee shop, that's never going to go away. But in terms of if you're starting off with a brand new show, a brand new project, think about who your audience is and what value they're going to get from it. And ask yourself, could they get all this information quicker, more efficiently, and more importantly, 24 hours a day from another source, maybe AI? And if the answer to those questions is no, then go ahead and start your show. And I'm not trying to say don't do a show because you might get sort of thwarted by AI. I'm just saying that there's so many videos out there telling you about AI is going to do this and take over this and so on. You know, there is a little bit of scaremongery, but also I'm a realist and keeping things into perspective. So it's important to, you know, provide value, entertainment, and just have fun with it. That's the end game here. You want to be able to come into your studio, start recording, start going live, and have fun with it. If you think it's going to be a job and nobody's going to watch this and it's going to get me down and I'm going to have to record 100 times over, maybe it's not for you. So just record, go live with intent and with value and with a purpose, and the rest will come, because we have fun doing this, don't we?
Yeah. And can I just add an extra P to that? I think personality is well, because I think, like you say, even if you're doing something which AI could do, if you do it your way with your personality, I'd rather watch you than watch the AI version.
Yeah.
So I think understanding that the professional and polished is really good, and we talked about microphones and cameras and all that sort of stuff as well. But I'd much rather you did all of that and then you fluffed your words and you could hear the rain coming down and the helicopters and all the rest of it. But we had a great conversation. Absolutely. And it was worthwhile than just getting that stuff out. And so I think Neil's absolutely right. Just really think about what you're doing and why, and make sure that people are watching you because you show up authentically as yourself. And authentically always sounds like a weird word, but just, you know, you are being you. You're not trying to be a presenter that you're not, or you're trying to be a personality that you're not, or an expert that you're not. You are doing what you're doing with your experience in your way. So however that comes up, even if you're the best in your field or you're just starting out, just be honest about what you're doing and then just crack on with it. And I think that's probably the secret to your enjoyment, and like you say, the secret to your success.
Yeah, sound advice. Absolutely. I'm thinking of a YouTube channel that basically flips the AI avatar on its head, where a real person pretends to be an AI avatar, and see if that resonates and connects with people. It could be something that takes off. Watch this space. If there's a bunch of YouTube channels this time next year that do that, we said it first right here. A few more comments coming in before we close up tonight, and it's been marvelous that everybody's been chatting with us. Let's have a look. Okay. If you ask, people will answer. You don't have to figure it out all by yourself. Absolutely. Thank you, Saeed. Yorg says, I fumbled with the muted scene because Ecamm auto mutes video scenes, and it might happen that the following scene stays muted. I've seen that quite a lot happening with creators. Yes, I've seen people like start their live show and the first 5 minutes they've been on mute because nobody's joined them on the live show to tell them that they're on mute. So that's a problem as well. Happens to the best of us. I've done that. I've recorded an entire, not a live show, but an actual video tutorial on mute. I was so happy because I didn't listen back to it, you know, but I've learned my lesson now. No, Yorg is always over checking. Yes, that's right. Reboot everything before you go live. Yep, that's our top tip. Make sure because your system just, you know, can be sitting there for days, clogging up with stuff. Wow, reboot the computer for 3 years. That's impressive, Saeed. Wow, who does that? And Saeed's final quote, to quote ChatGPT, "Great catch, Mark." It does that though, doesn't it? It's so nice to you, isn't it? Even when you mess up, And when it messes up, it doesn't really admit anything. It says sorry, but, and then it comes up with anyway, what can we say? Wonderful AI. Well, this has been wonderful. Again, Lisa, we miss you. Hopefully you'll be back next week. I think we're back next week. We'll do something next week. We've got a few tools we've been playing with and things like that. We've got a few things that I'd like to talk about as well. So all good stuff. And Saeed says, video-only podcasts might become a thing. Who needs audio? I see your point. Don't like just talking. Yeah, there you go. Through the... And on that note, we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye.